Have you ever reached the end of a long, exhausting day, sat quietly for a moment, and asked yourself a question that felt uncomfortable, even scary? A question like, why am I so busy, yet feel like I'm not moving anywhere meaningful? You wake up early, you work hard, you answer emails, you chase deadlines, you plan goals, you push forward every single day. From the outside, your life may look productive, but inside, something feels off. There's a quiet sense of confusion, a subtle emptiness, as if all this effort is happening in the wrong direction. This feeling is not laziness. It's not a lack of ambition. And it's not failure. It's misalignment. And that is exactly where this story begins. In today's world, we are taught to chase growth at all costs. More money, more clients, more followers, more recognition, more speed. We are taught that if we just stay busy enough, if we just hustle harder, success will eventually feel fulfilling. But what if that belief is wrong? What if the real problem isn't that we're doing too little, but that we're focusing on the wrong things? This is the central question behind the book Focus on What Matters, Aligning Your Business with Your Purpose by Stephen Kim. And although this book speaks directly to business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders, its message goes far beyond business. At its core, this is a book about life, about meaning, about clarity, about learning how to stop running in circles and start moving in a direction that actually feels right. Stephen Kim begins with a truth that most people don't want to admit. The modern world is not short on opportunities. It's drowning in them. Every day, we are surrounded by options, ideas, strategies, trends, and voices telling us what we should do next. Social media shows us what success looks like. Gurus tell us how to scale faster. Books tell us how to optimize every minute of our time. But in the middle of all this noise, something essential gets lost. Our sense of purpose. Stephen Kim is not someone who speaks from theory alone. His ideas come from lived experience. He has worked closely with businesses, leaders, and organizations that were growing on the surface but struggling beneath it. Companies that were profitable yet internally broken. Leaders who were respected but deeply burned out. Entrepreneurs who had achieved what they once dreamed of, only to realize that the dream no longer felt meaningful. What inspired this book was not a single moment, but a pattern Stephen kept seeing again and again. Businesses were chasing metrics instead of meaning. People were confusing movement with progress. And worst of all, they were building lives and companies that looked successful but felt empty. Stephen Kim argues that focus is not just a productivity skill. It is a moral choice. What you choose to focus on shapes your business, your relationships, your mental health, and ultimately, your life. When your focus is scattered, your energy leaks away. When your focus is misaligned with your values, success becomes a burden instead of a blessing. Early in the book, Stephen tells a simple but powerful story. Imagine you are driving at night. The road ahead is dark, and your headlights only illuminate a short distance in front of you. You don't need to see the entire journey to keep moving forward. You just need clarity about the direction you're heading. But if your steering wheel is even slightly off, if your alignment is wrong, you can drive for hours and end up completely lost. That is how most people live. They wake up, move fast, stay busy, and keep driving, without ever checking whether their direction still makes sense. Stephen introduces the idea that clarity comes before growth. Yet most people do the opposite. They grow first and hope clarity will follow. They scale their businesses, expand their responsibilities, increase their workload, and assume fulfillment will appear at the finish line. But fulfillment doesn't work that way. Purpose is not a reward you receive after success. It's the foundation that makes success sustainable. This book challenges a deeply ingrained belief that doing more is always better. Stephen Kim explains that focus is not about saying yes to what matters most. It's about having the courage to say no to everything else. And that courage is rare because saying no feels risky. It feels like missed opportunity. It feels like falling behind. But in reality, unfocused growth is far more dangerous than slow, intentional progress. Stephen describes how many businesses collapse not because they lack talent or resources, but because they lose their sense of why they exist. When a company forgets its purpose, every decision becomes reactive. Leaders chase trends instead of values. Teams lose motivation because their work feels meaningless. Customers feel the disconnect, even if they can't explain it. The same thing happens in personal life. When your daily actions are not connected to a deeper purpose, life starts to feel heavy. You feel tired even after resting. You feel restless even when things are going well. And no amount of external success can fix an internal misalignment. Stephen Kim emphasizes that purpose is not some vague motivational phrase. It is a practical compass. It helps you decide what to prioritize, what to ignore, and what to let go of. Without purpose, focus becomes impossible. And without focus, energy is wasted. One of the most striking ideas Stephen introduces early on is the difference between motion and meaning. Motion is activity. Emails, meetings, planning, execution. Meaning is impact, contribution, alignment. You can have a life full of motion and completely lacking meaning. And this is why so many high-achieving people secretly feel dissatisfied. Stephen invites the listener to pause and ask a difficult question. If everything you are working towards succeeds exactly as planned, will it actually make your life better in a meaningful way? Not busier, but better. Most people never ask this question. They are too busy chasing the next goal. The book slowly guides us to understand that focus is not something you add to your life. It's something you remove distractions to uncover. Purpose is already there, beneath the noise. But to access it, you must be willing to slow down, reflect, and challenge assumptions you've been living with for years. Stephen Kim doesn't promise quick fixes. In fact, he warns against them. Real alignment takes honesty. It takes discomfort. It requires admitting that some goals you've been chasing no longer serve you. It requires letting go of identities that were built around achievement rather than meaning. As the foundation of the book is laid, one truth becomes clear. A business aligned with purpose doesn't just perform better. It feels better to run. A life aligned with purpose doesn't just look successful. It feels peaceful, even when it's challenging. And this is where our journey truly begins. Because before Stephen Kim can teach us how to align business with purpose, he must first help us understand what focus really means and why most people misunderstand it entirely. Most people think focus is about concentration. They imagine someone sitting at a desk, ignoring distractions, locking their attention onto a task, and pushing through until it's done. Stephen Kim argues that this idea of focus is incomplete. True focus, he explains, is not about forcing your attention forward. It's about pulling your life into alignment. He invites us to imagine focus as a lens. When the lens is clear, everything you look at makes sense. Priorities become obvious. Decisions feel lighter. But when the lens is cracked or dirty, even simple choices feel overwhelming. You second-guess yourself. You feel pulled in different directions. And no amount of effort can fix a broken lens. Stephen shares stories of leaders who worked 12 to 14 hours a day, yet constantly felt behind. They had calendars packed with meetings and inboxes full of urgent messages, but no clear sense of what actually mattered. When asked why they were doing certain things, their answers were vague. Because it's expected. Because competitors are doing it. Because we've always done it this way. This, Stephen explains, is how focus quietly disappears. Not through laziness, but through unexamined habits. He introduces a powerful insight. What you repeatedly say yes to becomes your life. Every yes is a trade. You are trading time, energy, attention, and often peace of mind. Yet most people say yes automatically, without checking whether that trade makes sense. Over time, those automatic yes stack up and form a life that feels crowded but empty. Stephen Kim explains that focus begins with awareness. Before you can align your business or your life with purpose, you must see clearly where your attention is currently going. Many people avoid this step because it's uncomfortable. Awareness reveals misalignment. It shows you how much of your energy is being spent on things that don't truly matter to you. He tells the story of a growing company that expanded rapidly into multiple markets. On paper, everything looked impressive. Revenue was increasing. The team was growing. But internally, the culture was breaking down. Employees felt confused about priorities. Leaders were constantly firefighting. When Stephen asked the founders what their core purpose was, they struggled to articulate it. They had built momentum without meaning. The turning point came when the founders realized that growth without focus had diluted their impact. They had said yes to every opportunity because they were afraid of missing out. But in doing so, they had lost clarity. Stephen explains that fear is one of the biggest enemies of focus. Fear of falling behind. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of making the wrong choice. Ironically, the desire to keep all options open is what keeps people stuck. Stephen Kim introduces the idea that purpose acts as a filter. When your purpose is clear, decisions become simpler. Not easier emotionally, but simpler logically. You stop asking, will this make us look successful? And start asking, does this move us closer to what we exist to do? This shift changes everything. Stephen emphasizes that purpose is not a mission statement hanging on a wall. It is a living guide that shapes behavior. It influences how leaders treat their teams, how companies serve customers, and how individuals structure their days. Without purpose, focus becomes reactive. You respond to whatever is loudest or most urgent. With purpose, focus becomes intentional. He explains why urgency is often mistaken for importance. Emails feel urgent. Notifications feel urgent. Deadlines feel urgent. But urgency does not equal value. Many of the most meaningful decisions in life and business are not urgent at all. They require quiet thought, reflection, and patience. Unfortunately, modern life rarely rewards those qualities. Stephen tells a story about a leader who realized that his most important work never appeared on his calendar. Thinking, listening, reflecting, connecting with his team. These activities didn't produce immediate visible results, so they were constantly pushed aside. Over time, the leader became disconnected, and his organization suffered. This highlights a critical idea in the book. What matters most is often invisible in the short term. Purpose-driven focus requires faith. Faith that investing in alignment, values, and people will pay off, even if the results are not immediate. Stephen Kim explains that misalignment creates friction. When your actions don't match your values, everything feels harder than it should. Decision-making becomes exhausting. Motivation fades. You feel resistance instead of flow. This is not a sign that you're doing something difficult. It's a sign that you're doing something wrong for you. He challenges the listener to rethink success. Instead of asking how much you can achieve, ask how aligned your achievements are with who you want to become. This reframing shifts the goal from accumulation to coherence. Stephen shares how many people confuse purpose with passion. Passion is emotional and fluctuates. Purpose is stable and enduring. You won't always feel passionate about your work, but when your work is aligned with purpose, you will feel grounded, even on hard days. Purpose gives meaning to effort. He explains that purpose often reveals itself through patterns, not lightning bolts. It shows up in the problems you feel drawn to solve, the people you want to serve, the values you refuse to compromise. But to notice these patterns, you must slow down enough to see them. The book gently but firmly calls out the illusion of balance. Stephen Kim argues that life is not about balancing everything equally. It's about prioritizing what matters most in each season. Trying to give equal attention to everything leads to shallow engagement everywhere. Focus requires choosing depth over breadth. As this section unfolds, a clear message emerges. Focus is not about productivity, hacks, or time management tricks. It is about alignment between your values, your actions, and your goals. Without that alignment, no amount of effort will feel satisfying. And now, having explored what focus truly means, Stephen Kim begins to take us deeper. He starts examining why so many people build businesses that eventually trap them, and how alignment with purpose can prevent that from happening in the first place. Many people don't realize they are building a prison until they are already living inside it. Stephen Kim uses this powerful idea to describe what happens when a business grows without purpose. At first, everything feels exciting. There is momentum, validation, progress. But slowly, almost invisibly, freedom begins to shrink. Decisions become heavier. Pressure increases. The very thing you built to create opportunity starts controlling you instead. Stephen explains that this doesn't happen because people are careless. It happens because they confuse success with expansion. They assume that bigger is always better, faster is always smarter, and more is always safer. But growth without alignment creates complexity, and complexity drains energy. He tells the story of an entrepreneur who started a business to gain freedom and flexibility. In the early days, the work felt meaningful. The customers were aligned. The vision was clear. But as the business grew, the entrepreneur began chasing every profitable opportunity. New products, new markets, new partnerships. Revenue increased, but clarity decreased. Eventually, the entrepreneur was working more hours than ever, disconnected from the original purpose, and deeply unhappy. Stephen points out a hard truth. If you don't design your business intentionally, it will design your life unintentionally. This is where alignment becomes essential. Alignment means that your business decisions support the life you want to live, not the other way around. Too many people sacrifice their well-being, relationships, and values for a version of success they never pause to define. Stephen Kim emphasizes that purpose answers a very specific question. Why does this business deserve to exist? Not why it can exist, not why it's profitable, but why it matters. When this question is ignored, businesses drift. They become reactive instead of intentional. He explains that alignment starts at the top. Leaders set the emotional and ethical tone of an organization. When leaders are unclear about their purpose, that confusion spreads. Teams sense it. Customers sense it. Decision-making becomes inconsistent. People feel busy but not fulfilled. Stephen introduces the idea that clarity is contagious. When leaders are clear about why they do what they do, it creates trust. People want to work for something meaningful. They want to know their effort contributes to something larger than numbers on a spreadsheet. He shares a story of a company that was struggling with employee burnout and high turnover. On the surface, the company offered competitive salaries and benefits, but people were disengaged. When leadership finally addressed the deeper issue, they realized no one could articulate why the company existed beyond making money. Once the leadership clarified and communicated a purpose centered on service and impact, something shifted. Engagement improved. Retention increased. Not because people worked less, but because their work meant more. Stephen Kim explains that humans are wired for meaning. We can endure hard work, long hours, and uncertainty when we believe it matters. But without meaning, even easy work feels draining. This is why alignment is not a luxury. It's a necessity. The book also explores how misalignment shows up emotionally. Chronic stress, decision fatigue, a constant sense of urgency. These are not signs of ambition. They are signals that something is off. Stephen encourages readers to listen to these signals instead of ignoring them. He introduces the concept of intentional constraints. This idea may sound counterintuitive, but Stephen explains that limits actually create freedom. When you decide what you will not do, you protect your energy for what truly matters. Purpose-driven businesses often grow slower at first, but they grow stronger over time. Stephen contrasts two types of success. One is noisy and impressive. The other is quiet and sustainable. The noisy version is fueled by external validation. The quiet version is grounded in internal alignment. One leads to burnout. The other leads to longevity. He also challenges the myth that purpose limits profit. In reality, purpose sharpens profit. When you know who you serve and why, your messaging becomes clearer. Your decisions become faster. Your brand becomes more authentic. Customers are drawn to businesses that stand for something real. Stephen Kim explains that alignment does not mean rigidity. It means coherence. It means that your actions make sense together. Your values, strategies, and behaviors reinforce each other instead of pulling in different directions. As the book progresses, Stephen begins to address a deeper layer of the problem. Even when people intellectually understand the importance of purpose, they struggle to live it out. Old habits, external pressure, and fear often pull them back into misalignment. This leads to an important realization. Alignment is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. And this is where Stephen Kim shifts the conversation from ideas to inner work. Because to focus on what matters externally, you must first understand what matters internally. Stephen Kim now turns the spotlight inward, because before alignment can exist in business, it must exist within the individual. He makes it clear that many external problems are simply reflections of internal confusion. When a leader feels scattered, the organization becomes scattered. When a person lacks clarity, their work mirrors that uncertainty. He begins by addressing identity. Many people tie their identity to what they do rather than why they do it. Job titles, revenue numbers, public recognition, and achievements become substitutes for self-worth. This is dangerous, Stephen explains, because when external circumstances change, identity collapses. Purpose-driven focus requires separating who you are from what you produce. Stephen tells the story of a high-performing executive who lost his sense of direction after a major career transition. Without his role, he felt invisible. His confidence disappeared. Through reflection, he realized he had built his identity entirely around performance. Once he reconnected with his deeper values, contribution, mentorship, and integrity, he regained clarity and rebuilt his life on a more stable foundation. This insight leads to a powerful idea. Purpose anchors identity. When you know what matters to you at a core level, external success becomes a tool, not a definition. Stephen Kim explains that clarity requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. Many people avoid deep reflection because they are afraid of what they might discover. They fear realizing that they've been chasing goals that don't truly matter to them. But avoiding that truth only prolongs dissatisfaction. He introduces the concept of values as decision makers. Values are not abstract ideals. They are practical tools. They guide choices, shape behavior, and define boundaries. When values are unclear, decisions become exhausting. When values are clear, decisions become consistent. Stephen emphasizes that values reveal themselves through behavior, not words. You can say you value family, but if your actions consistently prioritize work over relationships, your true values are exposed. Alignment begins when behavior matches intention. The book explores how internal misalignment often shows up as self-sabotage. Procrastination, overworking, perfectionism. Overworking, perfectionism, and avoidance are not character flaws. They are signals. Signals that something you are doing does not resonate with what you believe matters most. Stephen Kim encourages readers to pay attention to resistance. Resistance is often interpreted as weakness, but it can be a form of wisdom. When you consistently resist certain tasks or directions, it's worth asking whether they align with your purpose. He also discusses the danger of borrowed goals. Many people pursue dreams that were never truly theirs. They adopt expectations from family, society, or culture without questioning them. Over time, these borrowed goals feel heavy and unfulfilling. Stephen shares a story of an entrepreneur who built a successful company in an industry he never cared about. On paper, he had achieved everything he was supposed to want. But emotionally, he felt trapped. Through reflection, he realized his real purpose was creative problem-solving, not industry-specific success. This realization allowed him to pivot his role and redesign his work around what truly energized him. The book makes it clear that purpose does not require dramatic change overnight. Alignment can begin with small shifts, reframing responsibilities, setting boundaries, saying no more often, protecting time for reflection. Stephen Kim also addresses fear directly. Fear of losing status, fear of disappointing others, fear of uncertainty. These fears keep people stuck in misalignment. But Stephen argues that clarity reduces fear. When you know why you are doing something, uncertainty becomes manageable. He introduces the idea that focus requires letting go of ego. Ego seeks validation and comparison. Purpose seeks contribution and impact. When ego leads, focus scatters. When purpose leads, focus sharpens. The book highlights the importance of self-awareness. Without it, alignment is impossible. Stephen encourages regular moments of reflection, not as indulgence, but as necessity. Reflection allows you to recalibrate before drifting too far off course. As this internal work deepens, Stephen prepares the reader for a critical shift. Once you are clear about your internal alignment, the next step is translating that clarity into action. Purpose without action remains abstract. Focus requires structure. Stephen Kim makes a crucial transition here. Up to this point, the journey has been about clarity, identity, and inner alignment. But clarity alone is not enough. Without action, purpose remains a good idea rather than a lived reality. This is where many people get stuck. They understand what matters, but they don't know how to organize their lives and businesses around it. Stephen explains that structure is not the enemy of freedom. In fact, the right structure protects freedom. When your days are designed around your purpose, you waste less energy fighting distractions and indecision. Focus becomes easier because your environment supports it. He introduces the idea that every system you create reflects what you value. Your calendar, your processes, your meetings, and your metrics all tell a story. If your systems reward speed over quality, people will rush. If they reward output over impact, people will burn out. Alignment requires redesigning systems so they reinforce what truly matters. Stephen tells the story of a company that measured success only through short-term financial metrics. As a result, employees optimized for numbers, not customers. Over time, trust eroded. When leadership redefined success to include customer satisfaction and long-term relationships, behavior changed. Systems shape behavior more powerfully than motivation ever will. He explains that focus must be visible. Purpose cannot stay hidden in the founder's mind. It must show up in daily decisions. What projects get prioritized? How conflicts are resolved? What behaviors are rewarded or corrected? Stephen Kim emphasizes that boundaries are essential for focus. Without boundaries, purpose gets overwhelmed by noise. Boundaries are not walls that limit growth. They are filters that protect alignment. Saying no is not rejection. It's selection. He describes how many people overload their schedules because they confuse availability with value. Being constantly accessible feels productive, but it often prevents deep work and meaningful connection. Purpose-driven focus requires intentional unavailability. Stephen introduces a powerful metaphor. Imagine trying to water a garden using a hose with holes everywhere. No matter how much water you pump in, most of it leaks out. Focus works the same way. When your attention is fragmented, effort is wasted. Alignment seals the leaks. The book explores how modern technology amplifies distraction. Notifications, messages, and constant updates keep attention in a reactive state. Stephen does not argue for rejecting technology, but for using it intentionally. Tools should serve purpose, not dominate it. He shares practical stories of leaders who reclaimed focus by redesigning their workdays. Fewer meetings, clear agendas, dedicated thinking time, protected rest. These changes did not reduce productivity, they improved it. Stephen Kim explains that focus also requires emotional discipline. Emotions influence attention. Anxiety pulls focus toward threats. Comparison pulls focus toward others. Fear pulls focus toward safety. Purpose pulls focus toward meaning. Developing emotional awareness allows you to choose where your attention goes. He also discusses the importance of rhythm. Humans function best with cycles of effort and rest. Constant pushing leads to exhaustion and poor judgment. Purpose-driven focus respects natural limits. Rest is not a reward for productivity. It is a requirement for clarity. Stephen introduces the idea that alignment creates resilience. When challenges arise, purpose provides stability. Instead of reacting emotionally, aligned leaders respond thoughtfully. They ask, what matters most right now, rather than what feels urgent? As the book progresses, Stephen begins to connect alignment with leadership. Leaders who are focused on what matters create cultures of trust. Their teams feel safe, valued, and clear. This clarity allows people to do their best work. He emphasizes that leadership is not about control. It's about direction. People don't need to be micromanaged when they understand the purpose behind their work. Alignment replaces supervision with shared understanding. At this point in the book, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Focus on what matters is not a slogan. It is a way of living and working that touches every decision, every system, and every relationship. And now, Stephen Kim turns to one of the most difficult areas of all: maintaining focus when the world constantly pulls you away from it. Stephen Kim acknowledges something most books avoid saying out loud. Even when you know what matters, even when you've aligned your values and redesigned your systems, staying focused is still hard. Not because you are weak, but because the world is designed to pull you away. Distraction is not accidental. It is engineered. Stephen explains that modern life constantly competes for attention. News cycles thrive on urgency. Social platforms reward outrage and comparison. Business culture celebrates speed over thought. In such an environment, losing focus is not a personal failure. It is the default. This is why purpose-driven focus must be actively protected. He shares the story of a leader who had successfully aligned his company around a clear mission. For a while, everything improved. Then slowly, old patterns crept back in. Meetings multiplied. Priorities blurred. Reactivity returned. What changed? Nothing external. The leader had stopped guarding his focus. Stephen uses this story to explain a critical idea: alignment decays without maintenance. Just like physical health, focus requires ongoing care. You don't exercise once and stay fit forever. You don't clarify purpose once and remain aligned for life. He introduces the idea of intentional review. Purpose-driven people regularly pause to ask themselves hard questions. What am I spending my energy on? Does this still matter? What has quietly become a distraction? These questions act like course corrections, preventing drift. Stephen Kim explains that distraction often masquerades as opportunity. New ideas feel exciting. New projects feel promising. New demands feel important. But not every opportunity deserves attention. Focus requires discernment. He challenges the listener to rethink the fear of missing out. Missing out is not always loss. Often, it is protection. Every opportunity you decline makes space for something more meaningful. Focus is less about grabbing and more about guarding. Stephen discusses how ego complicates focus. Ego wants recognition. It wants to be seen as busy, successful, and important. Purpose wants impact. It wants to serve and contribute. When ego leads, focus scatters across activities that boost image. When purpose leads, focus narrows around what truly helps others. He tells a story of a business owner who accepted speaking engagements, partnerships, and media opportunities mainly for visibility. Over time, these commitments drained his energy and distracted him from his core work. When he began filtering opportunities through purpose rather than ego, his focus sharpened and his work improved. Stephen Kim emphasizes that focus also requires emotional boundaries. Not every problem is yours to solve. Not every crisis deserves immediate response. Purpose helps you distinguish between responsibility and over-responsibility. He explains how many leaders burn out because they absorb emotional stress that isn't theirs. They try to carry everyone's expectations. Purpose-driven focus allows you to care deeply without carrying everything. The book also explores the role of patience. Purpose-driven work often unfolds slowly. Results may not appear immediately. This can feel uncomfortable in a culture addicted to instant feedback. Stephen reminds the listener that depth takes time. Meaningful impact cannot be rushed. He shares how some of the most respected organizations he worked with seemed unimpressive in their early years. They moved deliberately. They said no often. They invested deeply in people and relationships. Over time, their clarity became their advantage. Stephen Kim explains that distraction fragments identity. When you constantly shift attention, you lose a sense of coherence. Purpose-driven focus restores wholeness. Your actions start to tell a consistent story. You feel more grounded, even when life is uncertain. As this section unfolds, the book begins to feel less like a business guide and more like a philosophy for living. Stephen is not teaching how to win at work. He is teaching how to live with intention. And now, he brings the conversation into an even more practical space. How purpose-driven focus shapes money, success, and the way we define achievement. Stephen Kim now addresses a topic that quietly influences almost every decision we make, whether we admit it or not. Money. He does not treat money as the enemy, nor does he glorify it as the ultimate goal. Instead, he reframes it as a tool, powerful, necessary, but dangerous when misunderstood. He explains that many people say they want purpose, but their behavior reveals that what they truly chase is financial validation. More income feels like proof of worth. Higher revenue feels like safety. Bigger numbers feel like progress. The problem is not money itself. The problem is allowing money to define what matters. Stephen tells the story of a founder who doubled his company's revenue in 2 years, but felt more anxious than ever. Every increase raised the stakes. Every success created pressure to maintain it. Instead of feeling free, he felt trapped. Money had become a measuring stick for identity rather than a resource to support purpose. Stephen Kim makes a powerful statement here. Money amplifies alignment or misalignment. If your work is aligned with your purpose, money supports growth and impact. If it's not, money magnifies stress, fear, and emptiness. He explains that purpose-driven focus changes how you relate to money. Instead of asking, "How can I make more?" you begin asking, "How much is enough to support what matters?" This question alone shifts priorities dramatically. It reduces unnecessary complexity and creates space for intentional choices. The book challenges the assumption that success must always scale. Stephen argues that scale without purpose leads to fragility. Bigger systems are harder to maintain. More revenue often brings more pressure. Purpose-driven growth asks a different question. What size allows us to serve well and live well? He shares examples of businesses that intentionally stayed smaller to protect quality, culture, and alignment. These businesses were not failures. They were conscious choices. Stephen reminds us that choosing sustainability over expansion is not weakness. It is wisdom. Stephen Kim also explores how money affects relationships. Financial pressure can distort priorities. It can push people to compromise values, neglect loved ones, or justify harmful behavior. Purpose acts as a guardrail. It defines what trade-offs are acceptable and which are not. He explains that many people sacrifice present meaning for future security that never feels secure. They tell themselves they will slow down later, enjoy life later, reconnect later. But later keeps moving. Purpose-driven focus brings life back into the present. Stephen challenges listeners to redefine wealth. Wealth is not just financial abundance. It includes time, health, peace of mind, and meaningful relationships. A life that looks rich on paper but feels poor internally is not success. He introduces the idea that purpose creates enough. When you know what matters, you stop chasing endless accumulation. You become more selective. Contentment grows not from having more, but from needing less. The book also addresses how purpose-driven focus influences decision-making during financial uncertainty. When revenue drops or markets shift, fear often takes over. Stephen explains that aligned leaders respond differently. They return to purpose. They ask how to serve, not how to panic. This steadiness builds trust. He shares a story of a company that faced a major financial downturn. Instead of making reactive cuts, leadership revisited their purpose. They protected core values and people. The recovery was slower, but stronger. Employees remained loyal. Customers noticed the integrity. Stephen Kim emphasizes that short-term sacrifices for long-term alignment often look irrational to outsiders. But over time, they compound into resilience and credibility. As this section unfolds, it becomes clear that purpose is not opposed to success. It redefines it. Success becomes less about winning and more about contributing, less about comparison and more about coherence. And now, Stephen turns to the most human part of all, how focus on what matters shapes relationships, leadership, and the way we show up for others. Stephen Kim now brings the conversation into relationships, because no life or business exists in isolation. Purpose-driven focus is not only about what you do, but how you relate to others while doing it. He explains that misalignment often shows up first in relationships long before it appears in results. When people are unclear about what matters, they become reactive. They listen poorly. They rush conversations. They prioritize being right over being connected. Over time, this erodes trust. Focused, aligned people, on the other hand, bring presence. They are able to slow down, listen deeply, and respond with intention. Stephen tells the story of a leader who prided himself on efficiency. Meetings were short. Decisions were fast. Results were strong. But his team felt unseen and undervalued. When Stephen worked with him, the leader realized he was optimizing for speed instead of understanding. By reconnecting with his purpose, developing people, not just outcomes, his leadership style changed. Productivity didn't suffer. It improved. Stephen Kim emphasizes that leadership is relational before it is operational. People follow clarity, not commands. When leaders are aligned with purpose, their behavior becomes consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust creates psychological safety. And safety unlocks creativity and commitment. He explains that purpose gives relationships context. Without context, interactions feel transactional. With purpose, they feel meaningful. This applies not only to work relationships, but to family and friendships as well. Stephen challenges the idea that success requires sacrificing relationships. He argues that relationships are not obstacles to achievement. They are the environment in which achievement becomes worthwhile. The book explores how focus affects communication. When you are scattered, conversations are shallow. You are physically present but mentally elsewhere. Purpose-driven focus allows you to be fully engaged. This kind of presence is rare and powerful. It makes others feel valued. Stephen Kim also discusses conflict. Conflict is inevitable in any meaningful pursuit, but purpose shapes how conflict is handled. When purpose is clear, disagreements are about ideas, not identity. People feel safer expressing different perspectives. This leads to better decisions. He shares an example of a team that struggled with constant tension. The root issue was not personality differences, but unclear priorities. Once the team aligned around a shared purpose, conflicts became more productive. People disagreed without hostility because they were moving toward goal. Stephen explains that purpose-driven focus also influences boundaries in relationships. Saying yes to everyone often means being present for no one. Alignment allows you to set limits without guilt. You can be generous without being depleted. The book addresses family life as well. Stephen acknowledges that many people pursue success to provide for their families, but end up sacrificing time and presence in the process. Purpose reframes provision. It includes emotional availability, not just financial support. He tells a story of a parent who realized that despite working hard for his children's future, he was missing their present. By realigning his priorities, he restructured his work and reclaimed time. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was meaningful. Stephen Kim emphasizes that purpose-driven focus is contagious in relationships. When you live with clarity, others feel permission to do the same. Your presence becomes grounding. As this section unfolds, one truth becomes clear. Alignment is not selfish. It is relational. When you focus on what truly matters, you show up more fully for the people in your life. And now, Stephen brings everything together. He moves into the final phase of the book, where purpose becomes a daily practice and focus becomes a way of being. Now, Stephen Kim shifts the focus from principles and stories to practical application. How to live purpose-driven focus every single day. He emphasizes that understanding alignment intellectually is not enough. It must be translated into habits, routines, and choices that reinforce your purpose consistently. He begins by exploring daily decisions, which often seem small but accumulate into profound outcomes. Every action, Stephen explains, is a vote for the life and business you want to create. Checking emails impulsively, saying yes to every request, attending every meeting. These are votes for scattered focus. Skipping reflection, avoiding hard conversations, ignoring boundaries. These are votes for misalignment. Conversely, protecting thinking time, prioritizing meaningful work, and honoring commitments aligned with your values are votes for purposeful growth. Stephen tells the story of a founder who transformed her company not by chasing revenue or growth hacks, but by restructuring her day around what mattered most. She blocked time for strategic thinking, delegated tasks that distracted her, and refused projects misaligned with her mission. Within months, productivity increased, stress decreased, and her team felt energized because the company was finally moving in one coherent direction. He emphasizes that daily alignment is both proactive and reactive. Proactive alignment is planning your day, week, and quarter with purpose in mind. Reactive alignment is responding to unexpected events in a way that does not compromise your core priorities. Purpose acts as the filter for every choice, simplifying even chaotic circumstances. Stephen Kim explains that systems are essential to sustaining this focus. Habits, processes, and routines act as scaffolding. Without them, even clear purpose is vulnerable to distraction and fatigue. He shares examples of leaders who created simple yet powerful routines, starting each day with reflection, ending the week reviewing what truly mattered, and aligning every project with their core mission. These routines do not restrict creativity. They channel energy efficiently. The book dives into a key insight. Alignment in action requires saying no consistently, not occasionally, not when convenient, but as a deliberate practice. Saying no is often painful because it triggers fear of missing opportunity, rejection, or judgment. But every yes to something that doesn't matter is a yes stolen from what truly does. Stephen stresses that this is not about scarcity but clarity, choosing deliberately what deserves your energy. He introduces a framework for decision-making rooted in purpose. For every choice, ask 3 questions. Does this align with my values? Does this move me closer to my meaningful goals? Will this contribute positively to the people I serve? If the answer is no or uncertain, the right decision is often to decline or defer. Over time, this framework becomes intuitive, freeing mental bandwidth and energy for the most important work. Stephen Kim also addresses momentum. Focus is not only about single decisions, but about compounding alignment over time. Every day, small consistent actions aligned with purpose produce results that exponential growth cannot match. Conversely, scattered, reactive decisions compound into chaos. Purpose-driven focus creates leverage, the ability to achieve more with less friction, stress, and wasted effort. The book explores how to apply these lessons to career choices. Aligning your work with purpose might mean leaving a stable job, pivoting industries, or starting a project that feels risky but meaningful. Stephen acknowledges the discomfort but reframes it. Misalignment is riskier because it erodes satisfaction, health, and energy over time. Purpose-driven courage is safer in the long run. Stephen Kim then addresses finances again, this time from the lens of application. He encourages people to invest in alignment, not just revenue. Budgeting, spending, and reinvesting should serve your values and purpose. Purpose-driven focus transforms money from a source of anxiety into a tool that supports intentional living. The book also applies lessons to relationships and personal life. Stephen emphasizes intentional presence. Aligning focus in personal life means prioritizing meaningful connections, honoring commitments, and avoiding habitual busyness that sacrifices quality time. Small, deliberate interactions build trust, loyalty, and emotional well-being. He introduces the idea of reflection rituals. Daily journaling, weekly reviews, and quarterly assessments create checkpoints. They allow you to notice drift before it becomes a crisis. Reflection is not a luxury. It is the mechanism that keeps purpose alive amidst change and chaos. Stephen explains that the final step in daily application is self-compassion. Even the most purpose-driven person will fail, get distracted, or make poor choices. Alignment is not perfection. It is recalibration. Recognizing misalignment without judgment allows you to course-correct and continue without guilt. He shares a story of a leader who implemented these practices and initially struggled. Despite careful planning, external pressures threatened to pull him off course. Instead of giving in to frustration, he returned to his core purpose, reset priorities, and continued. The results were profound. Clarity, energy, and influence increased, not because circumstances changed, but because focus was protected. As this section concludes, one theme becomes unmistakable. Living purpose-driven focus is not a one-time project. It is a daily commitment to clarity, discipline, and alignment. It requires awareness, intentionality, courage, and reflection. But the payoff is transformative. Energy that feels abundant, decisions that feel easy, work that feels meaningful, and life that feels coherent. And now, Stephen Kim moves into the final part of the book, a powerful synthesis that leaves the reader not only inspired but ready to act. The conclusion is both emotional and practical, reinforcing the message that purpose-driven focus is the path to fulfillment in business and life. And now, as Stephen Kim brings everything together, he leaves us with a message that is both simple and profound. Clarity, alignment, and focus are not abstract ideals. They are choices we make every day. They are the way we decide how to spend our energy, our attention, and our time. They are the difference between a life that feels heavy and chaotic and a life that feels purposeful, powerful, and full of meaning. He reminds us that no book, no mentor, and no strategy can replace the daily work of reflection and intentionality. The real transformation happens when you apply these lessons in your life. When you wake up tomorrow and ask yourself, does this align with what truly matters? When you begin saying no to distractions, yes to meaning, and protecting your focus as if your life depends on it, because in reality, it does. Stephen leaves the reader with a challenge: to take the concepts of purpose-driven focus out of theory and into action. Start small, start now. Identify one area of your life or business that feels scattered. Choose one thing to say no to this week. Protect one block of time for reflection. Every small action compounds into momentum. Every alignment brings you closer to clarity, fulfillment, and sustainable success. He also emphasizes that this is not a journey you have to take alone. Surround yourself with people who respect your focus. Seek mentors who model alignment. Build systems that protect your attention. And most importantly, remind yourself constantly why you are doing what you are doing. Purpose is the compass that guides not only your business decisions, but your life decisions. Finally, Stephen Kim leaves us with a message of hope that no matter how misaligned or scattered life feels today, it is never too late to recalibrate. Focus on what matters, align your actions with your purpose, and every choice you make will begin to reflect a life lived intentionally. Your energy will increase, your relationships will deepen, and your work will feel meaningful. And now, as we close this journey together, here is the call to action for you, the listener. Take a moment today to reflect on your priorities. Ask yourself, am I focusing on what truly matters? Identify one change you can make immediately to realign your actions with your purpose. Commit to that change. Protect it. Follow through. The difference between a life of endless motion and a life of meaningful progress begins with this single decision. If this message resonated with you, make it a habit to return to it often. Share your insights in the comments below. Let us know one area where you plan to reclaim focus. Subscribe to this channel, The Universe of Book, to continue exploring life-changing ideas like these. Like the video to show that you are committed to living purposefully. And remember, focus is not a destination. It is a way of living, a way of working, and the most powerful gift you can give yourself and those around you. Your life is your business. Your business is your life. Focus on what matters, and everything else will follow.